Yes, you said we're good, right? Yeah, okay. All right, good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It's Wednesday, January 24th, 2018, and we are in the Freeport High School Library. Everyone's here at the moment except for Sarah. I imagine she'll be joining us shortly, but we'll get started. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, consideration and approval of the minutes in your packets. We're looking for a motion for consideration and approval for the minutes for the December 13th, 2017 and January 10th, 2018 as presented, barring any errors or omissions. Valley, second from John. All those in favor? None opposed, thank you. Adjustments to the agenda. The only adjustment is we currently have one executive session on the agenda. We're going to add a second one at item 16 to cover the superintendent's, not the district goals. The district goals we'll do as part of the open session, but the superintendent's goals. The mid-year check-in on those we'll do in an executive session at the end. Other than that, we will carry on as presented. And we will start with 6, good news and recognition.
So we want to recognize the students tonight that have been selected for the all-state choir, and they will be able to join other students from across the state that have also been selected in a concert in May.
Wonderful. And we have certificates to acknowledge your fantastic performance, and so we'll do those.
All right.
Make them sing for their certificates. We would do that too.
Yes.
All right. And for students on here, I think Ms. Golko is willing to accept their certificate.
But you have to sing.
Oh, for mixed choir, we have Natalie Crawford. So Ms. Golko.
We'll just do it right here.
You want me to come at the end?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Okay, and Rhea Fitzpatrick. And Julia Haldeman. And we know Ben Morane's here. And Isabella St. Cyr. And for the treble choir, we have Mariah Holland, Shiloh Munson, and Emma Ray. And one more round for the whole group. And a big round of applause.
Okay, so congratulations to all on that. Fantastic job. Report from the board student rep. So Ben's here this evening.
Good evening. So we've had a lot of nothing going on recently. The last few weeks, we've definitely had a lot of snow days. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of mixing up of days. Obviously, we've had the all-state and district auditions pretty recently. The district festival is actually this weekend, and then the all-state festival will be a little bit later in the year. Obviously, fall or winter sports are still going on, and midterms have just wrapped up. no fatalities this year. So that's about it. Yeah. So yeah, we've all made it through midterms, and we're on track for the next semester. So that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, 7 is public comment. So anyone who wants to share anything with the board, feel free to step up to the mic. I think we're surrounded by administrators in the audience today, so they'll all get their chance to speak later. Okay, superintendent's report.
So I'm just going to expand a little bit on Ben's report. Our winter sports seasons, they are in full swing. Our girls basketball team is having a very successful season with 9 wins and 2 losses. Our boys basketball team is doing pretty well with 7 wins and 4. Our cheerleaders were runners-up in the Western Maine Conference Championship and will be competing at regionals this Saturday at the Augusta Civic Center. Indoor track and skiing teams are just getting started. And I also wanted to mention that the unified basketball team is just starting to practice, and their first home game is against Cape February the 9th. And also on February the 9th, Freeport and Durham 8th grade basketball players come together for an 8th grade scrimmage where students from both towns are mixed up and they play a game, and then the favorite part is the pizza afterwards. So I have a little bit of an update on the track and field. Pat Carroll has issued substantial completion on the track and field, but not the softball field. And today, Michelle was at that meeting with me, both Michelles. We met with RAD, where Rob Delmonico, the owner, started talking to us about the liquidated damages that we're seeking on the track and field. We felt like it was a good conversation. They listened to our concerns and will be getting back to us with probably a counteroffer. We will then take that offer to our finance committee for consideration. They're committed to finishing the softball field as soon as they can get on it in the spring and doing what is needed to ensure that we're going to have a quality field for the girls to play on. And then we're planning our grand opening ceremony on Friday, May 18th, which will be our first track meet at our new facility. And we have a planning meeting. Maddie's in on that, and Kim Lamar on Valentine's to plan the event. So we'll have more details to follow on that. And then I also wanted to give the board an update on the high school renovation. I spoke to Lyndon Keck today from PDT, and I'm really pleased to report to you that they have agreed to replace the concrete plaza by the cafeteria that is very kind of mismatched. And so that leaves us with 2 remaining unresolved issues. That's part of that is the ledge issue that I think I've talked to you about, and we're hoping to resolve that in the next week. And then the other area that we have not reached agreement on are the allowances. And so the contractor is submitting their final bills and invoices, and from there we'll figure out how much credit that we are owed from the allowances. And then lastly, I just want to report out on the retirements that you can see on your sheet. We have the following people that will be retiring effective at the end of the school year, and at that time we'll be recognizing them in a ceremony here before a board meeting. We have Fran Townsend, the administrative secretary from Mass Landing. We have Jim Milheim, custodian at the Durham Community School. We also have Pam Lazat, who is at the Durham Community School, the guidance counselor. Susan Gorman is the PE teacher at Moore Street School, as well as Allison Miller, who is a kindergarten teacher at Moore Street School, another kindergarten teacher at Moore Street School. Kathy Pierce is also retiring. And finally, Diana Passmore, Freeport Middle School special education teacher. They're all retiring at the end of the year. In addition to that, I want to report 2 resignations. I accepted the resignation from Chris Abbey, bus driver, effective 1/19. And then also Amy Goodwin, an ed tech at Durham Community School. That will be effective February the 2nd. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Okay, thank you. 8B, Administrator Reports. Finance. Ms. Lichtai.
Hello. So you have your purple sheet in front of you. At this point, we are halfway through the fiscal year, so we should be at about 50%, which is right about where we are. So I'm very happy to report there have not been any issues that have come up that have been unknowing or surprising. And the very small minor things that have come up that we've requested with a couple things with Dennis, we've gone through the Finance Committee to get approval. So I see everything right on track right now. I am hoping to do after we've done the budget to do a projection to find out where we're going to land at the end of the year, and I will report that out to the Finance Committee as well. On the HR side, I'm happy to report that the new software program for recruiting is through the testing phase, or actually in the testing phase. I do believe that Sandrine and Will had a little fun today with testing the recruiting software. So that's going along very well. So we're hoping for this hiring season that will be in full swing. So that's all I have to report right now.
Any questions for Michelle? Okay, thank you. Okay, update on math. Cynthia.
I'm just going to take a moment to set up the screen for a second.
Are you dropping the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Underneath. Yes. You have handouts in your packet that you can get ready. So you should have the PowerPoint in your packet, and then on top of it is a sheet that really goes through a general update. These are actually part of our board goals, so I'm going to handle those parts while I do my presentation, because they kind of weave into the next part of Dr. Foley's presentation. Thank you. Oh, he's got it, I think. Go ahead. Oops, let's go back one. Somebody might look familiar on that top page. I didn't know that was, it's one of our board members' daughters. I didn't know that until Ray. Where's Ray? He's not here. Oh, there you are. Let me know. So as that clears in. Thank you. Okay. So the handout that you have, when we talked about our board goals in the fall, talks about implementation of the 612 math curriculum. And we had, in that second column, those activities come right from our board goals. And so you can see the updates there and the details, and I won't get into that too much unless you have questions or if they're not hit in during the presentation. And then on the next side, we talk about differentiation of math in K-5, and I think you'll hear that being talked about during the presentation, but we can come back to this sheet at the end if we need be. So tonight, Amy Wheeler on the left and Nate Garnett were supposed to be in our presence tonight, but both were unexpectedly unable to attend tonight. So I will be doing the full presentation, and if there are any other questions, I have Lisa Demick that will help out with the K-5, and then Will and or Ray will help out with the 6-8 as we go along. So Amy on the left is new to our district this year. She was hired as our pre-K to 5 math strategist. She is working in all 4 buildings, and she came to us with, I think, over 20 years of elementary education experience. So she's very experienced person. And then Nate has been here at least 3 years. He is currently the math coach at Durham and at math strategist at Durham and at Freeport Middle School in grades 6 through 8, and he also teaches a 7th grade class as well in Freeport Middle School. So you have this in your packets. You may be able to see it a little better there. So the way this was set up is the K-5 is on the left and the 6th through 8 is on the right, and these are the goals that we have developed this year. If you remember earlier in the year, we talked about having a math audit for K-5. I'll start with K-5 on the left. We had 2 consultants from UChicago, and they came out and they conducted a pretty in-depth they went around to all the classrooms. They went in every single classroom in K-5. They individually interviewed every single principal. They interviewed Dr. Foley, myself, and the math strategist. They conducted surveys, anonymous surveys to all of the K through 5 math teachers, and then they held 2 focus groups, a K2 focus group without any administration there, and then a 3-5 focus group. So they really were able to see what is actually going on in practice in the classrooms, what strategies are being used in the classrooms. They were able to tell us all of the strengths, and we had many, and they were able to also give us where we need to go next. So from there, we developed several goals. One of the goals that they highlighted was to improve our differentiation in math during the block of math. So as you know, we have some pull-out support, some RTI. You've heard of lift blocks or flex blocks in the different schools. This is more about the differentiation that's happening right within the lesson, the lesson itself. They also gave us recommendation to increase our use of the virtual learning community and Connect Ed that supports the Everyday Math program, to use math strategy groups, to have an understanding of key math concepts in the math units so that they're really knowing ahead of time what are the key concepts in these units, and then using the pre-assessments to differentiate ahead of time. So if you use the pre-assessments, you know, here's what I know they know, here's what I know they don't know, and how do we develop strategy groups and differentiate during the unit of instruction to best meet the needs of all of our learners. And then the second bullet is deepening the understanding of the mathematical standards and mathematical practices. And what they saw was a lot of interaction with students, but not a lot of student-to-student interaction. And you'll see in the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about the mathematical discourse. So that is an area of focus. So those will be areas of professional development that we will be doing this year. We also developed a newly formed math committee, K-5 Elementary Math Committee, and we are going to be setting goals as a committee that will be a 2 to 3 year plan on where we're going to focus. And at the 6-8, on the 6-8 side, as you know, we just implemented Big Ideas. We've had several professional development days. We've had an outside consultant also come in. He's a Big Ideas math consultant, and he worked very closely with Nate, our math strategist. So they had 2 days where they really worked together to really differentiate the learning. We did some with the high school, some with the middle school, and then a combination. And then, let's see. We want to have, the goals that we set were, there's a lot of goals that we can set. We don't want to focus on everything all at once. So we really picked the things that were going to be the most important. Pacing was one of the areas that we were looking at. So making sure that all of the units are taught in all of the grade levels so that we don't unintendedly create gaps for students. So that was one of the things that Nate started the year working on with the individual grade levels. They worked together during the Summer Institute to work on pacing guides, so that not only all of the students will make sure they don't have gaps, but that when the teachers come together for professional development and they're working in the particular units, they're all working on the same unit, they're taking apart the unit, and what should that look like, and what's happening in your classroom, and here's what I'm doing. And they're actually doing some of the math, working on the math themselves, so that they know what the kids are going to go through. So the bulleted areas are the activity exploration to be completed with each lesson, so that's that active engagement. The structure of the lesson, making sure that the learning targets are clearly there for the students and the teachers, and then consistently utilizing the dynamic assessment system. There's a lot available in this program. There's a lot of online components available in this program. We chose to look at the homework, how are we assessing the homework through the online component, how are we using formative assessment, the online component, because these things, even though there's it takes a bit to learn about them, you get a lot of payback, and you can quickly tell where students are if they're using those online components. You can make assignments that are very specific to students based on what their needs are. So not everybody has the same homework problems. So there's a lot to learn there for the staff, but there's a lot of benefit to be yielded from that. And then, excuse me, I'm dry mouth here. And then we're going to focus on the PD, the coaching, and then the PLCs. And one of the things we talked about is, we're always trying to steal that time, that our PLCs, we try to fit everything into them, but we really need to have some time to talk about math and how are we going to do that, and are we going to use some release time to do that. So there's a lot going on in math in our district, a lot of positive things. So the next slide is meaningful mathematical discourse, and you can see the quote there is effective teaching of mathematics facilitates discourse among students to build shared understanding of mathematical ideas by analyzing and comparing approaches and arguments. We know there's many ways to solve problems, and we want children to really be exploring those and talking about those. And part of the mathematical practices is understanding how different people are approaching those mathematical problems, persevering through the problems. So the more we can get students, like you see in these pictures, to actually have those conversations and problem solve, and the teacher facilitating, the better off they're going to be with mathematical understanding. So on this page, I probably hit a little bit of this earlier. So this was developed by this page was developed by Amy, and this format is the same as the next slide for 6-8. So it kind of takes you through what their responsibilities are and what they're doing right now across the district. So for K-5, much of her work this year, first of all, because she's new, was building relationships. It's important in those coaching roles to really build really strong, positive relationships with teachers that you're going to be working alongside with, problem solving together with. That's really a very important part. So she's really done a great job, and she's got 4 schools that she's traveling to. So she's trying to divide up her time a couple of days, and she rotates between 2 schools, and I think Lisa may be able to fill you in a little bit more on the detail around that. She's done some trainings during our professional development days. She's worked with the RTI teachers on early numeracy and the early numeracy continuum and fact fluency. So I think she's had a couple of different sessions with them on that. And then she also publishes a weekly blog, which I think maybe I'll have, I'm not sure, Lisa, do you know much about her blog? So we'll talk about that after. I think she posts different math messages and best practices in her blog for the teachers to get them. It's kind of a fun way to get them involved with like a math problem of the day. So I think her intent is to just continue to communicate. I know that the TC strategist, the literacy strategists, do something similar. To communicate with their teachers. The professional development has focused on deepening understanding of early numeracy progression for our pre-K2 teachers and fraction learning progression in grades 3 through 5. And you can see that we are piloting a lab classroom in February. And if you go way to the right, it says that collaborative coaching lab classroom pilot. We have one of the people from U Chicago who's coming out. She's going to be here for 3 days, February 7th, 8th, and 9th. And she will be doing a lab classroom. It's kind of the best way for teachers to learn. You go right into a classroom in one of the K teachers' classrooms, for example, and you have the teachers teaching the lesson, and they all the kindergarten teachers that they are participating in that. Then they're debriefing it. They're going back in. What would you do next? You're looking at student work and so forth, and they will do it again in a grade 2 classroom and then a grade 3 classroom. So we're piloting this year. If this model works, we'll continue that work for next year. And they're also doing a book study with the strategists. And you can see I skipped over that coaching cycle. So she's providing new teachers with extra support. She really communicates a lot with the principals to see what the needs are in the buildings. So it's not just, I'm here on this day, I'm here on this day. You get each an equal amount of time. It's what are the needs in each of the buildings. And the principals really work well with her and communicate well to see where they're going to put their focus. Sometimes she's doing staff meetings in one building. She's focusing a lot on open-ended response questions as well. And that's the day that they're doing the lab, or the 3 days that they're doing that lab classroom, they will be focusing on that open-ended response questions, because that's where we find that a lot of our students need the work. And in 6-8, you see he's got doing math all the way across. So a lot of, he's meeting with each grade level several times throughout the year. I think he started with 6th grade, and then he met with them for a month doing a couple units, moved to 7th grade. And so he's got a whole schedule of that, and that he's shared with me. Every time that they're having any professional development, they're actually doing the math. And you know, he focuses on that a lot. He says that's very important, and it absolutely is, to know what what you're asking of the students. Let's see. I have his notes here. So he says his 4 levels of PD, each enriching the math experience of our students, because each is based on student outcomes rather than teaching styles. And I think that's important. Every teacher has a different teaching styles, but the focus of our math work is on student outcomes. And he says, you notice doing math comes up a lot. It reinforces the idea that we're all learners, and that doing the math helps us see things from the student's point of view. And he does in-class coaching. He also teaches, as I mentioned earlier. And I think I mentioned that at another board meeting, that he's in that University of Maine Farmington coaching math program. And Amy will be doing that as well. So our next steps, we have ongoing professional development planned, and we're right in the process of our next couple of meetings, our math committee meetings. We have 2 different math committees. We have a 6-12 and we have the pre-K 5. So we are talking about starting to have talks about our summer institutes and what those will look like. We continue to have free professional development from our outside consultant for that first year of Big Ideas Math. So we are utilizing him. He's going to be coming again in March. We are going to continue to focus on that student-to-student discourse and the 8th mathematical practices. I think I mentioned a couple of them. The polynomial identification process review, that is actually on our next agenda for our math committee. We had a process last year. We're just going to review it, make sure that it's still what we want it to be, and make any revisions as necessary. We will continue further data analysis as we start getting the scores in and feedback of multiple sources. And then our high school, we will be working on the full implementation. And one of the, Jay Thomas is on our math committee. He came to one of our math meetings last spring, and he and I talk through email, in addition to him being on the math committee. And he's talking about, he's had collaborative time to work with one of his colleagues in algebra. He said he felt like a need was some pacing guidance. As you know, they don't have a strategist at the high school yet, and you know, they're dabbling in the online pieces that will be helpful to them to move forward. So. You know, he's very positive about that, and as we move forward with Algebra 1 and Geometry and Algebra 2 for next year. So those are our big next steps. And thank you for supporting our math strategists and our math program. And I don't know if Lisa, do you want to add anything that I may have left? Okay, if there's any questions. Or if you're hearing anything positive about the math. I might just take you to, oh, was there? I was going to say I might just take you back to make sure, to this cover sheet, to make sure that I've hit on everything in there. So the implementation, we talked about the professional development and PLCs, consultants, and math walkthroughs. I did not mention that math walkthrough during the presentation. So as administrators, every time we have a BT meeting, which is at least monthly, we rotate throughout the district at different schools, and usually it's the very first 45 minutes of our meeting. We are going in pairs or triads into we try to go into math classrooms because that's been our focus this year, because it hits two places. So we're talking about calibrating what our feedback is going to be in the evaluative process, but we're also looking at our learning targets there in math and all these other mathematical things happening. Is there student-to-student discourse and all of that? So, so we've done 3. There are 4 schools listed, but one day we went to 2 schools. So Freeport Middle School and High School was done on the same day, and then we came together at the high school, and we will continue to do that throughout the year. Let's see. And I think the gate clustering model we've talked about, and that's going well, and we've done some revising in that. We've talked about that at our gate. We just had our second advisory meeting last week and talked about how that's going, and it's getting better. We worked out some scheduling glitches at the beginning and some planning time, so that's improved for the gate clustering model for 5th and 6th grade. Number 4, differentiation of math K-5. We did the needs assessment that I talked about, and we've developed our goals. And I think I've hit everything in the presentation that was on the sheet except for the evaluation walkthrough.
Thank you, Cynthia. That was a good presentation. Lots of great information, a lot of good progress. I'm curious to know more about the release days.
Yes.
Apparently, those are happening during the school day.
Yes.
So how many teachers will be released at any one time? What's the impact on the kids of having all those subs? How often do we want to do that?
Okay. So, Ray, can I ask you to come up for that one? Ray has more first-hand information around how many times that's happened, and because it's 6th grade, it would be 6th grade, and then another day it would be 7th grade, so it's not all of them together, but I'll let you speak.
I think you're exactly right. I mean, when there is release time, it is definitely pulling the teachers out of the classroom. With that, so the 6th grade has gone, I think, twice and done that. So, those 6th grade teachers have missed the math part of their day, multiple times. The 7th grade teachers haven't done it as much because Nate is in teaching in the 7th grade, and when they have done it, the 8th grade is getting ready to start that cycle. For Durham, it's the same teacher for 7th and 8th, so she gets hit there on both sides of it. On Nate's side of things, I'm starting to get into his classroom more and actually do the teaching, because those kids are missing the teaching and instruction. So instead of getting stuff for him, what we've done is I've actually gone in and learned the big ideas lessons myself to figure out how to do it and learn. So it's good learning for me, and also keeps the sub out of those buildings, out of those rooms.
But all in all, you think that despite the fact that the kids are with subs and they don't have the same quality instruction, the quality PD for the teachers is worth the effort?
It outweighs the negative. I mean, okay. Absolutely, it's a negative to have a sub and a teacher compared to a classroom teacher delivering instruction. But where we're going in the long run, it's something that's needed. The time has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have in mind anything in terms of how much we would increase the time that we have subs to release teachers to do PD for next year? Because Cynthia mentioned that we want to expand on that model. How much do we want to expand it?
So one of the things I think you'll see in the calendar proposal for next week, and it may even get mentioned in a few minutes, is we're going to be asking for another early release day for next year. I think I agree 100% with what Ray said, that there is that balance, but in the long run, the payoff is much greater.
And the only other thing I would add, if Nate's a full-time coach, then a lot of this can actually happen during teachers' preps, and we're not necessarily needing to do that. Because now we only have Nate half the day. So, like, we try to schedule it when we can, when he's free, but that's not always when the teachers are free.
Will, would you come to the mic?
Quick, right, Will?
Seems like a long walk to disagree. No, I would just say that, you know, I concur with Ray, except on one piece, is that we've also found that when teachers, with their planning time, there really isn't enough time to do that work. So although the coach might be available, for teachers to come out and do new learning, we really have found that extended time. So when they are out for some of the work that Nate's been doing, has been like half a day with one grade level, then half a day with another. And that seems like a more reasonable amount of time. And I would say that, again, agreeing with Ray, that the payoff works. The students are still getting math, and the advantage of the program is that there's a pattern to it, so that the work can be left to be quite meaningful, not just made up. But I think it would take more than just a planning period.
Oh, combination.
Yeah.
I will say Nate did the 6th grade introduction to big ideas in Durham, and he made us do the math.
Awesome.
Created a fight between my husband and I because we disagreed on the answer. I think he was right.
You weren't both right?
He'll never watch this video. So but it was interesting to see like how he walked us through how we did. He just gave it to us, and then he sort of back to the beginning and said, okay, well, what if I gave you this instruction? How would that change what you did? And
Right.
It was very interesting, and having a kid in that grade and watching him using the online quite a bit, you know, right
Good.
now. He should be home right now studying for his chapter 4 test tomorrow. And they use a lot of the quizzes and a lot of the reviews, and, you know, he gets instant feedback whether it's right or not. Sometimes I don't know. So I think it's been really, I've liked it a lot.
Yeah. Great. Excellent. Okay. Thank you.
Well, Cynthia, your first 6th through 8th goal is to complete all the units in the Big Ideas Math. What systems do we have in place for students who aren't able to keep that kind of a pace?
So the way that it's set up, well, there's a lot involved. So we do have, we're working on the differentiation for those students that are having some difficulties, but we're also assigning problems that are appropriate for that student. And we also do have the RTI and the pullout, and I don't know if you've seen that, Ray or Will? Yeah, okay.
Anything Ray says.
We'll come up and disagree in a second, but no, I mean, I think that it's definitely ambitious to get through all the chapters for all of the kids. With that, we have multiple, a lot of kids that do need to take that assessment more than once, that are going back and seeing the teacher, creating a new relearning plan, and retaking that assessment to get it up to the level that needs to be. We have, RTI support for these students that they can go to, during their study halls. Some kids, we've had to drop a class, another academic class, to provide the support in language arts and math to get them to meet the standard with that. And then there's, special ed students that are in the mainstream receiving special ed support to get to meeting the standard. So it's definitely, there's a lot of supports around, and our goal is to get everyone to meeting the standards and all. I think we'll definitely get everyone through everything. Whether we get everyone with 3s and everything will be another question.
Kate, don't go too far.
Yeah, I don't go too far because you might have to answer this. At the when we're using the RTI and differentiation, how as a parent is it communicated where your child is in terms of completing each of the units and moving on and reaching that goal of completing them for the year? Because and this might be more applicable to the lower grades, but I'm at times not sure that as a parent that I know where my kids stand, and so then that makes me wonder if there's more we could do to communicate that to parents to get more support from them as well.
Lisa's gesturing to me to come on up. So. Thank you, Ray.
One of the things we did a few years ago to try and make sure that that was happening in every elementary classroom is we created cover sheets that go with each of the units. So at the end of each unit, you should be getting how your child did on that assessment so that you can see how they're doing. And those should be coming home regularly, like every 4 to 5 weeks.
So if you have the assessment, it would say on there if the child didn't meet the standard that they're having to redo some of that unit? Okay. All right.
Actually, in the elementary grade, what tends to happen, because the goals spiral, is the teacher takes that information from, say, Unit 2, kind of flags where it is in 3 and 4, and it's something that as it sort of continues to come back, they're able to use the information from the assessment to continue to teach and reteach where it needs to go. But one of the important things about pacing, just to John's question, because I can't not say it, is one of the old practices in math was to sort of sit and wait until the last 3 kids got the fraction concept that you were working on. It's really important that, and what would typically happen would be that nobody would get to geometry because it was chapter 8 in the book. So that idea, that the model that you heard Ray talking about catching kids in the moment and trying to do in addition to, is really better for all kids. And it's why differentiation is so challenging, because I use the analogy of trying to fix the plane when you're flying across the country. That process for teachers, it takes a lot of planning and a lot of responding, and it's not something you can prepare in the summertime to know where kids are going to be in November and what Sally's going to need in the next unit. So I would say that's what we hear from teachers, and that's where we're always trying to support folks, because when you gather the information and you see what different kids need, you want to respond right away. And so that's why we're trying to build, they're not calling it RTI anymore, they're calling it a multi-tiered system of support. So it's really about all kids all the time, and that we're supporting them as they move. So.
I just had one last question on the unit assessments. Do those occur for each student at the same time? Okay.
So one of the steps moving forward was to fully implement the Big Ideas program at the high school.
Correct.
And then you mentioned we don't have a strategist at the high school.
Correct.
Are we confident that we can successfully implement without that key component to implementation? We're relying so much on Amy, and
No, we definitely can't.
we can or cannot.
No.
So what are we doing about it? You're saying we cannot
stay tuned.
implement without the coach?
Stay tuned.
Budget presentation? Okay.
10 minutes. You got
That's why I was
10
looking at her.
minutes.
I didn't know if she wanted me to.
I can wait 10 minutes. Another question.
Yeah.
And this is about the clustering for the 5th and 6th.
Yes.
I read the minutes. I couldn't attend the meeting, but I
Yes.
read the minutes, and there was one note that said there's very little mixing between GT and non-GT students. The way I understood the model was that we were trying to make groups where the kids could mix. Is that an issue?
So one of the, so.
Or are we reaping the benefits, full benefits of the model?
I think that the conversation was positive. There's kind of two groups. There's two kind of groups at Freeport Middle School. There's the identified GT, and then another group of kids where Ray's going to take over.
So our 6th grade group is quite large, which is great in so many ways. But but in this one way, it had so many that qualified that really needed this level of differentiation. So we did divide them into 2 groups, and we have 2 teams of kids. And to service the GT kids in language, arts, and math, because a lot double over, most of the kids who are identified for GT are on one team, and the high ability kids are on another team. So it has been separated slightly, and that group of GT kids is super high flying, and a lot of times in that math do go off in a separate classroom, and they get some of the instruction in the regular classroom, but a lot is with the teacher the GT teacher directly, because of how high that specific group is, where the other teams GT cluster or high ability cluster looks much different, where there's much more of kids navigating in and out each unit by unit based on their skills, where the other group there's such a high level in there that there's only 1 or 2 that migrate in or out. There's 4 or 5 that are consistent every single time, where next year, we're going to be down 40 kids overall. The GT numbers will be down, the high ability numbers down. We're really probably looking at only needing 1 cluster to have all your high ability and GT kids right there together. So it will look different next year just because of the numbers of the kids. So at the beginning of each chapter, or the end of each, end of chapter 1, what they do is they do a pre-assessment for all of the kids that are there, and the kids that have a solid understanding of that chapter are the ones that are pulled out and given some different instruction. And most of the time for like that GT cluster, they have a thorough understanding of the entire chapter to start out with. So they're not navigating in and out lesson by lesson within the unit, where the other class, it might be 3 sections they did really, really well, but 1 they didn't. Those kids will kind of migrate in and out throughout the chapter with that. So it does look slightly different just because of the ability levels between the 2 classes. So, we don't want to leave a child in that class if they've already aced the pre-test on there.
Is that how it works in dark?
So, but I would imagine our 2nd class that has the kids flowing in and out a little more freely is what next year's group would look like.
I was fine with your sure answer.
Oh, okay, great.
I didn't really buy it, though.
Yeah. It's obviously just numbers are down, so we don't have the 2 classes. So what you were hearing is much more like the second piece that Ray was describing, where there's some GATE students along with some that will intermix a bit more within the class, but their work is all within the classroom. So it's like a co-teach model, which is sort of the piece that Ray was talking about in one of the groups and potentially for them next year. So because of our numbers, it's more like that.
Are they clustered all in one class?
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Maybe
Buy
it's
that, Kate?
this is probably back to Ray, and I don't know if we want to spend any time on it or not. I'm just the 6th grade class will be next year's 7th grade class. It's still a large class. What do you mean the numbers are going down by 40, and it'll be different because
Next year's 6th grade class. So looking at this year's 5th grade, like looking at that data, like we've
Right.
already looked at that data preliminary. Like when I look at that data,
Okay.
my guess is that it's probably going to be, 1 cluster class. But then looking at And then also looking at the data from this year's sixth graders, which we are going to talk about at the math committee coming up, but looking at that data of those kids, that will probably feed into one, Algebra 1 class for these kids in 7th grade.
So in 7th grade, the kids that are operating separately now will have a chance to work together more.
They will, and probably some others as well, that, some of the kids that, kind of have gone back and forth, some of those are close enough that, they need that challenge of being with that other group. Some would be much more beneficial being the top kid in a different class, in a regular math class.
I just wanted to make sure that, this class, this particular cohort of kids wasn't going to be constantly in this situation.
So this is the 5th, 6th grade model. Then the 7th, 8th grade model is there's a standalone high ability class taught by Alex Brand.
Got it. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, we went way over on maps. That's what happens when I don't bring a watch.
Remind us what time it is.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Cynthia. That was great, and everyone else who jumped in. All right, so our last administrative report is the update on district goals that Dr. Foley is going to do. 20 minutes.
Would you put the timer on? And would you nudge me when it's like 10?
Okay.
So in your board package, you have the goals that you adopted back in September, and then we emailed you just a kind of goals update, and I think that may also be in your packet. So our first goal, well, let's just remember our overarching goal is just to continue to improve student achievement kind of across the board. And within that, you adopted 3 strategic objectives. And the first one is around the implementation of a proficiency-based learning system pre-K to 12. So our primary focus really on that is at the high school. And as you know, the 9th graders are currently in that system where they're the first class that will be graduating with a proficiency-based diploma. So when you look at all of the, how are we doing with the revision of the content standards and things like that, our primary focus this year has been on 10th grade. So we've been working with because the 9th grade has been done. Because they're in it, right? So we've been really working on getting the 10th grade, the teachers who are teaching our 10th graders up to speed, making sure that their standards, their performance indicators, the scoring criteria, all of that is being created, revised as needed, so they'll be ready for the current 9th graders. We've also this year created a parent guide at the high school, and we're really pleased with the way that has come out. And so by the end of the year, we're hoping to create a similar guide at both the elementary and middle school level, and we've yet to begin on that, but the high school one is completed. We feel like the system is going really well for our 9th graders. And we have informational meetings for our current 9th graders. That's been rescheduled. Jen, can you just shout that new date out for the current 9th grade parents?
Incoming 9th graders?
No, the current ones.
February 5th.
February 5th, we're going to meet with all 9th grade parents who are wanting to come to just provide us with feedback on how it's going for their students this year. We also have 2 parent meetings scheduled for our parents of our current 8th grade students. The first one will be January 30th because that was rescheduled due to the weather. And then we'll have one, I think, later in April. So we have that. So there are two pieces that we've heard a lot about this year. One has been that a lot of parents, or I should say some parents, have experienced that their students or their children are reporting that there's not a pathway to a 4. So we've had a lot of discussions around that at administrative meetings, and we're all working to make sure when we hear about a specific teacher or something that we're connecting with that teacher and providing support if there's not a pathway to get a 4, and we want to be really clear on that. The other issue that we've discussed quite a bit is just how does the report card look? Like it's cumbersome for some parents. So we've just currently hired Brenner Associates to work with us to customize the Power School so that it's a more kind of user-friendly report system for our parents. And we're getting ready to pilot that at the high school. So we're going to be using that. I think they'll be sending out report cards at the end of this month, right? Next week.
Also the end of the month.
Yeah, also the end of the month. And I think at the end of trimester 2, we're hoping to use it at the middle school level in both schools.
It's live on the parent portal now?
Live on the parent portal at Freeport Middle School. Yeah. Yeah. And is it coming soon?
Coming soon.
Okay. And at the elementary level, I'm not quite sure where we're at with that. Lisa, can you give a...
We're learning from the middle school.
We're learning from the middle school. So that's how we're trying to respond, in a timely way to those two big concerns. Also, we've scheduled 3 meetings that are just going to be kind of more open-ended informational sessions with myself and Cynthia, so parents can give us feedback in those forums too, not only on proficiency but any other board goals we have or anything else that's on their mind. So that's kind of the update there. Under B, you see the RTI implementation. I think I reported last year that academically the RTI system is pretty well in place. So this year our focus, and Bonnie Violet, our Director of Instructional Support, has kind of taken the lead on this, has been on the RTI B, which is more for behavior when our students are struggling with just being able to attend. And so she has worked a lot with staff, administration, on how to create really a template to use in creating support plans for students who need it. Of course, not all of our students need it. It's really a very small minority. But when those students are in class and are struggling, they can disrupt learning for others. So we really want to help those students, and I think it impacts everybody in the end. In addition to the support plans, we are meeting with the Dropout Prevention Committee, working with that, meeting more than the required once-a-year meeting. And also at the high school, we're implementing an alternative ed program that hasn't been up and running for a few years. So this is our first year providing another setting that will provide yet a different pathway to success for some students. And I think the last thing I want to just mention is also our Choices program, which we have at Durham and at the middle school. We're trying to create really clear criteria for when a student needs to enter those programs. So that's been our focus with RTI B. Then I'm going to skip over C and D because you just heard a in-depth overview of where we are with the math, and move on to our strategic objective number 2, which is improving teacher and administrative effectiveness. And as you recall, there is a statute that requires us to do this implementation, and I feel like we've just made a lot of good progress in the past year in this area. You heard Cynthia talk about for calibration for administration, we've been getting into classrooms every B team meeting, and then we debrief after the visitations. We will probably, in future months, look at videos and then use different parts of the Marshall rubrics to also calibrate there. In addition, the big on the teacher side, they've all been working for the past year on creating assessments that will be used for the student growth component when they're evaluated. Remember, there's two components. There's the professional practice, which counts for basically like 80% of their overall score, and then there's also the student growth data. So everyone now has an assessment that they're using that's been identified. The heavy lifting this year is, okay, so we're giving the assessments, now we have to enter the data. What is the system that we're going to use to track all of that data? That's a lot of tracking of data. Seth in the technology department has worked very closely with Cynthia to create a system to push out to teachers, and right now the teachers are entering their pre-assessment data in there, and then at the end of the year they'll give the post-assessment, and they'll sit down and reflect on how much their students have grown. So I feel like we've made great progress in that area. All right, and okay, thanks. So moving on to C, under that goal, peer observation. We were in that was one area I wasn't sure about, and I sent out an email to administration in the last week, and I was pleasantly surprised. That's ongoing. It's taking place in every one of our schools. Some of our schools have completed the requirement already, and we're just mid-year. So I think we're exceeding the standard in some areas on that one. Creation of the SMART goals, that's all done. That's on the website. Kate made a great suggestion about also putting the building SMART goals up there. And so that's there, and you can look at that link and go right to that. The principal evaluation document, we've been working on that in B teams. And then Cynthia's been reviewing that at the committee level, and we think we're going to have that ready for your review by May. So we're on track in that one. And the superintendent's evaluation tool, the committee just met today and finalized that, and that'll be ready for your second read at our next board meeting. So we're in good shape there. And then our last strategic goal is the creation of a long-term strategic plan. And remember, we decided that was a 2-year goal. So what you have here in front of you is what we just need to get completed this year, and we're on target for having that completed. We think at our next meeting we'll be able to select a facilitator and then outline the overall process, and we may even get into part of next year's work this year. So I'm open for questions.
Maddie.
I forget where it was, I'm sorry, but you mentioned an alternative education program at the high school that hasn't been in play for a couple years that's coming. Could you say more about what's
Yeah.
left and what's coming?
Yes, I'll have Jen come up to speak to that.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. So this year we started a program that's slightly different than how alternative programs have been at the high school in the past, which was really more of a separate program, separate part of the building. It actually used to be one of the portables that was behind the school. And so what we decided to do this year was to try expanding something that we had done for the past 2 years, which was a credit recovery class, but with teachers instead of being online. We were finding that a lot of students who are struggling with motivation and struggling academically struggle with a self-motivated online class. And so that class ran for 2 years, and basically this year's program is an expansion of that. So it's students who are identified, almost all are 11th graders. We have one 12th grader. They are not special education students. They are students who are credit deficient and only take half of the day of classes in this program that we call Endeavor. In the morning, they're either at Region 10 or they're in other classes that are in the school. So this is, there's a ELA teacher, a history teacher, and a science teacher who work with this group of students, and all of them are also part of online classes, but they have these teachers who are there who are supporting them, and then they have a class that's with those teachers that are in front of them.
Are you going to try to continue that model through the summer? Because that's when a lot of kids do credit recovery.
Yes, but it's a little bit different in the summer because this is students who are significantly, when we say credit deficient, meaning, you know, you might have a student who's supposed to be a junior who only has 4 or 5 credits. So meaning that they have multiple classes, where kids who come in the summer might just have one class where they didn't do well and they're recovering that class. So these students in this program will also be able to participate in summer school if they need to. I think the biggest thing that we've seen is also some of the students who are in that program have had significant attendance and behavior issues, and that's where we've seen an incredible amount of growth in these students. So some students who were spending quite a bit of time in my office or Mr. Mellon's office are either rarely coming or not coming at all, which is great.
Jen, did you say that we are using the portable for that, or that's the program that used to be in the portable, but we now have it in the school?
Yeah, we don't have portables anymore. So
I thought we relocated one for storage, and I didn't know if you were using that.
No classrooms. Okay. No, good. Plenty of beautiful classrooms.
Yay. That's what I want to hear.
Thank you.
I have one more question.
Oh, yeah.
If no one else has any others. About the PBE implementation, this is a question for Becky. At what time does the district ask principals to do a self-evaluation on how it's going with implementation, gathering feedback from students primarily, and then teachers primarily, and maybe parents?
So Jen, would you talk about what you and Charlie kind of had planned around just the feedback from parents? And then one of the things that I failed to mention, so thanks for that, is just that we do have a PBE committee, and at the end of last year we talked about we don't want to meet just for the sake of meeting, but we do want to meet when there's a need. And I would say after we get this first new report card out, I'm hoping to bring the committee together at sometime in February. And I think that would be a great thing to discuss. But you and Charlie, I know, had discussed this too with parent feedback.
Mm-hmm. So, and that's our goal, that both Charlie and my goal that I presented to the board was that one of our goals is soliciting feedback from student, staff, and parents about implementation. So we had our first faculty meeting in January, where we solicited feedback in different categories from staff. So we focused on grading and reporting, habits of work, scoring criteria, and there was one more that I'm forgetting. And so just getting information from staff. Then we have our goal is to have 1 or 2 parent meetings and 2 student meetings throughout the course of the year. So the first one is coming a week from Monday on February 5th. The first student one will be at the end of the month in February, and then we'll do another one later in the spring. Yesterday was the first day of the second semester, and feeling like it's important for kids to get through half of the year where they can look at the scores and where they stand, and then be able to share some feedback. And then just informally today, I went around to ninth grade study halls and met with just over 30 students and sat with them and went through each of their scores to see if they could tell me their progress in each class, where they were doing well and where they weren't doing well. And they did a great job with that. They were very clear. They were clear very quickly before I said anything. They're like, I know what I need to do. And I said, great, then tell me what you need to do. And so I think that's just another way that we're getting feedback from kids.
Okay, thank you. All right, so unfinished business, none. That's good. New business. In your folders, you have a salmon sheet. So we're looking for consideration and approval to employ an English language arts teacher at Freeport High School for the remainder of the 2017-2018 school year. So it's a 1-year position.
So this is, I'm nominating Megan Shea to do this position. She comes to us graduating from Simmons College, and she student taught in Boston, and then most recently has been teaching at the Wayfinder schools as a passages teacher. So I present her for your consideration.
Motion from Naomi. Second. Valerie, any questions?
One question.
Yeah.
This is just through the end of the year, so it's a temporary teacher. Okay.
Okay. Any others? All those in favor? Opposed? None. Thank you. So don't forget to put that sheet back in your folders. Okay. B, presentation of the superintendent's 2018-2019 recommended budget. 20 minutes. Just saying.
Can you give me a 15? 15. Right.
Just push it in a little bit. Don't.
Where's that?
I just put it in, but I didn't push it.
Here.
There you
I don't think so. I think I'm good for tonight.
She's going to fire this up.
Okay, Michelle, you can start the timer.
Already at 1 minute, 15 seconds.
All right. So, good evening, and I want to thank all the administrators for being here tonight. And I want to present to you an overview of our recommended FY9 budget. And this is really, I'm just excited to be bringing the administrators' best thinking to you for moving student achievement forward in RSU 5. So I want to bring your attention to the photo on the left. Last year at this time, that was just a vision. And through your support, that is a real picture of the track and field from a drone. And next to it, we have our students at Freeport Middle School in the drama department, and that has expanded so much that this year we're needing to have 2 different groups because the group has grown so large. So that's an example of some of the extracurricular activities that you've been funding. We've just gone over our board goals, and our mission to remind you is just to provide our students with a world-class education that will challenge minds, engage creativity, develop self-discipline, and advance inherent strengths. And there you see a picture of something else you funded in last year's budget that I talked about tonight, our unified basketball team. And so I want to thank you again for doing that because it really is helping all of our students with the pathway to success. And we just went over this, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but you have 3 key objectives with the overarching goal to just continuously improve student achievement in RSU 5. This slide shows that we just keep growing here in the last couple of years in RSU 5. So here's our historical enrollment. And this year, you're at an all-time high, but we think we're going to go even higher next year. And our administrators are projecting that our enrollment will be somewhere around 1977, just short of 2,000 students. So that's wonderful news. We're glad people are wanting to come and educate their students here in RSU 5. This is just showing you the enrollment by grade span, and you can see that our biggest gain right now, which I know that in the past you've been concerned about some of our students leaving, but you can see we've got a lot of students who are choosing to be educated at Freeport High School next year, and that is going to be where that big bump is at. Then this is showing projected class sizes. Last year at this time, we were projecting for this current year class sizes between 11 and 24, and that's pretty much what they've been. Next year, we're expecting class sizes to be, even with the increased enrollment, just the way it's spreading out, to be somewhere between 13 and 23. Right now, our eye is on the 5th grade mass landing, and we're watching that very closely. And we'll see whether we need to add another teacher there or not as we kind of monitor that throughout the spring. So last year, our areas to improve student achievement were really these areas. In addition, you remember last year we talked about universal pre-K. This year when the administrative team met, we had a lot of discussions about what's really going to move the needle, and so we chose not to expand the pre-K this year. So there are some students that wanted to be educated this year in pre-K that we had to put on a waiting list, but it was only somewhere around 5. And so when we were having to prioritize, we decided for this next year not to add another pre-K classroom. So we want increased staff for math support. Thank you, Valley, for setting that up so nicely for me. We want some additional positions for student support. And last, we want to talk about increased collaboration time for teachers. So this is number 1 on our wish list, that if we can only have one thing next year, we're wanting to have a 0.5 math strategist to be focused on math instruction 9 to 12. Why are we asking for that? I put the most recent SAT math data up there. I also put the state average, so just so you wouldn't get too depressed. We still are above the state average, but that is a number that we know that we can improve on with support and with the focus in that area. This is this is the same slide that's been updated from last year. You can see that over the past several years we've been focused on literacy in this district, and you can see that that this data kind of supports that. So starting in grade 5, you start to see the achievement data widen between math and language arts, and we want that to be level, that our kids are excelling just as well in math as language arts. The same thing when you've heard me talk about don't ever go with one data point. So when you look at the NWEA, you see the same kind of gap, that we're performing better in literacy than we are in math. Why do we care about math? Well, there's a lot of reasons to care about math, and this is the same slide I showed you last year because the research really hasn't changed. Earnings are higher for people with more math preparation. Kids who take more advanced math in high school are 17 percentage points more likely to enroll in college, and more importantly, they're more likely to complete college. So they're able to go into jobs where they can pay off that college debt and go into higher paying jobs. Secondly, on our wish list is increased student support. And this gets to your goal around RTIB. And so we're requesting a social worker and an increase at Moore Street and Mass Landing by 0.2. Last year, if you remember on the list, Will had asked for increased ed tech support, wanting more hours, moving them from 30 to 32 and a half, sometimes moving ed techs that are at the ed tech 2 level to the 3 level so that they can do more planning and more direct instruction with kids. And so we told you we wanted to take a more systemic look at that, and so we have done that. And one thing that needs to be added there is that we also want some increase in ed tech support at Moore Street School. And from Hattie's research, you can see you're always looking for an effect size of 0.4 or greater, and both the classroom behavioral support stat and RTI, you get an effect size that's very impressive at 1.1. And then this is, you know, when you're doing the new programs like the Big Ideas and the units of study and reading and writing and proficiency based, you really need time with the teachers to support them in their new learning. So we felt like the early release day went really well this year, and we would like to ask for one additional early release day that is at no cost to the budget. And that is, we know that the more teachers learn, that impacts student achievement with an effect size of 0.45. We have, in this budget, where we can, we have reallocated. We have a 0.5 regular ed tech at Moore Street School that we're willing to reallocate for some of those other requests that you just saw. Last year, as you know, Bomar informed us that they would no longer be providing transportation to our Durham students, and that resulted in a savings. So we're reallocating that money to some of those requests. And then in all lines this year, we really looked at historical spending. We didn't just say, what did we budget last year, but we looked at what have we been spending, and sometimes we needed to increase the line, and sometimes we were able to realize some savings. So we're hoping that this results in all students having a pathway to success. What does that mean financially? It means that what you've just heard about will result in a expenditure increase of 2.45%, with a net impact to taxation currently at 4.87%. What else other than what I've already talked about is in there that's driving that 4.87% increase? One of probably the biggest driver is that last year we ended up using part of our fund balance. We used $961,000, and we're reducing that to $600,000. So that's driving the tax impact. Our goal is to get somewhere. Michelle L. would love to get down to $250,000. If we got to $300,000 over the next few years, I'd be happy with that. But as we start to look at historical spending and budget in that way, we're not going to be able to continue to use such a large amount of our fund balance to reduce taxation. In this goal this year, we have had to hire a 0.5 van driver, so that is now in this next year's budget. You have heard Jen talk about NEASC, which is accreditation. That's an increase to the budget of about $20,000. one of the biggest surprises for me when we really started looking at historical spending was that we were way under budgeted in the subline, and so we need to increase that line by about $77,000. You've heard us talk about, we have this beautiful new track and field, but what are we going to do when we need to have it kind of redone in 15 years? So we're starting a reserve account, and we're recommending putting in $35,000 into that from next year's budget. And then the administrative team felt really strongly, I think this was number 2 on our list, that we need to have an increase in the capital improvements lines, because we all take a lot of pride in our buildings, and we want to make sure that they are kept up well. So this is what it looks like from historical. So back in 16, you were at a 7.77, and then you can kind of just see the numbers there. And for those who are like, love the graphs, there's the graph, the same information. It's really important for you to know when we present the budget this early in January, there are a lot of unknowns. So, that number is going to move. So, what do we not know tonight as I present this to you? We really don't know about our state subsidy. We are supposed to know that by February the 1st, so probably even by the next board meeting, I'll be giving you an update in this at that meeting. 2 of the big unknowns this year around subsidy is with the like Region 10, they're funding that differently, and we don't quite know what that will mean for money that we're receiving or money that Region 10 is going to be receiving directly. The other area is the governor and the commissioner are really pushing regionalization, and we don't know the direct impact on that with our subsidy. Hunter Road Fields, I'm happy to report the town is really wanting to continue in a contract with us to keep those fields up. That's a revenue source for us, but we have not created the contract or agreed upon the terms of that contract. So that may change a little bit. And then on the expenditure side, Region 10 hasn't done their budget yet, but we're putting in a 10% increase, and this is for continued roof repairs. And then the big unknown, as you know, is that we're negotiating 2 contracts, and that can have a big impact on the budget. Whoops, going the wrong way. Hey, yeah, I like that. Yeah. Could we all have that's it. And then this is our budget process timeline. If you remember, we even put in a 4th Q&A for the public. So we have 4 different times starting March 14th where the public can come from 6 to 6:30 in a more informal way for those who don't want to go to the mic and do public comment and give us feedback about what they or questions they may have about our budget. And I just want to kind of end with a quote by Benjamin Franklin that says, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. And I know that each and every one of you believe that as strongly as I do. So I want to thank you in advance for your support of this budget. And I think at our very next meeting, you will be hearing from Mr. Pidden and Ms. Galco and Mr. Groban, right? They're going to be up next. Do what?
That's what we're preparing.
Well, oh yeah, they're.
I knew there was time limits. I was like, yikes, you better start.
Yeah. Yeah, they're seeing we're tightening up. They're getting nervous, Michelle. And so that concludes my slide presentation. One other piece of information I want to pass out to you is I know that I just wanted to explain we went through a little bit of a different process This year, there are no superintendent cuts in the budget. But I know Valley especially wants to know, but what else did they ask for? So this, how am I on time? Okay, so for your preview, your quick preview, what you see here is 3 tiers. Under the first priority, you saw all of those included in the budget. Under the second tier, the DCS intervention teacher was the one thing that really was discussed along with those first priorities. And then underneath that, in the second tier, all of those positions received at least 1 vote. What you have on this sheet is something that at least one administrator put this forth as an idea. So we had a big brainstorming, like, what do you think could move student achievement or that's needed in the district? And so these were all of the things that we discussed, and then each administrator, they were each given so many votes, and they all voted on different things. And then we discussed it again and really talked about it and prioritized, and this is what you're seeing. Everything in the third tier, none of those received any votes, even though they were brainstormed, right? But even the people who threw the idea out there, they didn't even vote on those. All right, so that's kind of what you're seeing before you.
So the only ones that are in the budget are first priority?
Correct.
Are you handing those out, or are you just? I can. I see your big pile. I know,
What Michelle is handing out is just what you have received in the past on this night for your perusal when you're having insomnia at night. And so we're not going to take questions on it, but it's just what you have kind of received in the past, and then we'll have these at every board meeting for the public, and also as we have updates, we'll put them on different colored sheets of paper and let you know about the updates. So thank you.
Oops, I moved too fast. You good with this?
Yeah, thanks.
Very bright. All right.
And I would like to just thank my administrators for being here, and, you know, they're welcome to stay, but they're also welcome to, if they have better things to do. We've got some exciting policies coming up.
Mass exodus. No, thank you very much. I think that was a great high-level overview of the priorities, and now we can all dive into the details and be prepared for the presentations from the individual administrators over the next month. I will encourage folks. On the website is the list of the budget timeline and all the meetings, and encourage folks to come and ask questions, delve deeper. Let's hear what your thoughts are. I'll point out that March 14th, we specifically added that one then because that's the meeting prior to the adoption of the budget. So that's really, we added the Q&As post the board adoption to try and inform the community on our thoughts behind the budget, but we definitely heard some feedback that we'd like to have some input prior to the adoption, so that is really why we added that March 14th meeting. So I highly encourage folks to come and share their thoughts with us. Okay, so I'm on the wrong page. All right, board comments for, subcommittees, Strategic Communication Committee, and Draft Satisfaction Survey. Candy, you doing that one?
Yeah, and I'll be quick.
You have 15 minutes.
Well, okay. Obviously, we met, and you have the notes here from Becky. We looked at the first draft of the marketing brochure that Ginny did for us, and she did a wonderful job, and we made, a few suggestions, so we'll be getting those edits, and we'll get it to you probably pretty shortly, I would think, and she did a wonderful job. And we looked at the first exit surveys that came back. We got 16 back and didn't look at those saying, oh, we see this and this and this. We really need to see more exit surveys to look at trends. So we'll keep getting them and let you know when we have enough to kind of think about trends. And then we looked at the satisfaction survey, which you all have. And the thinking is for this to go out pretty quickly, is my understanding, pretty soon when we finalize the survey. Was that?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And Jenny just wanted me to report that she hasn't got this up and running. So don't expect it to go out like next week.
Okay.
But yes, but as soon as we can get to it, we see it probably going out, I would say sometime in February.
And that's just for parents to fill out, not children, correct?
Correct.
Yep. So I guess are we taking the time then with the 15 minutes to take a look at it, and any feedback?
One thing I noticed in that very first My Child Attends, you can only check one box. So is the expectation that if you have kids in different schools, you have to do it twice?
A couple of them, yes.
Do you think that's going to discourage people from doing it?
Yeah, it says please fill out one survey for each of the children in your family.
Yeah, but
You can just lump them all in one survey. You have to.
Yeah, okay.
no, it says fill one survey for each child. And that's what Michelle was asking, whether if somebody had 3 kids in the system, we're asking them to fill out 3.
Right.
And
Well,
do we think that would discourage them? I don't know.
I mean, I think there's probably, it'll highlight where the strengths and weaknesses are in the different schools.
Yes.
I would want to, not just one for all kids,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, okay. Just a question.
Yeah.
Maddie. Yeah. Mine are still in the same school, so I'm good for now. It's a good thing about Durham. You get 9 years.
So I just had a thought in looking at the questions in sections A and B. A number of those sentences start with the word teachers, and I mean I love what they're asking, but to potentially give a low mark on that would be potentially to ding a teacher. I know we're looking for feedback on our teachers, but I could imagine a parent who loves their teacher, their kid's teacher, but their kid's struggling, and their quarrel might not be with the teacher. It might be with the math program or the focus of the language arts class or the books they're using. And so I just wondered if in some of these sentences we could reword those sentences so that the subject of the sentence is my child. So, for example, under B, number 3, it might be the academic needs of my child are recognized and additional challenges are provided as needed, instead of teachers recognize the academic needs of my child. Does that make sense? I just,
Any other thoughts?
because I mean, there have been times when, not necessarily here, but when I've thought, teacher's great, but my kid's needs aren't being met for some other reason.
Yeah.
And given that there are the 2 open-ended opportunities for feedback at the end,
Yes.
maybe even add a highlight, please explain more at the end of the survey.
So one thing I would say is I think we have tried to address that through a variety of types of questions. So I guess I want to make it clear, I don't see us disseminating this data down to like the teacher level to go. I mean, it's anonymous anyway.
You'd never be able to.
So you'd never know.
Right.
So we do
But I'm not
offer
worried
like.
about that.
Okay.
I'm worried about the parent self-censoring because they say, oh, the teacher cares about my kid, but they still might have a problem. They still might feel like their kid's academic needs aren't being met.
Correct. Yes, I can understand that. Yep.
So each one of these, they're going to rate how strongly they agree.
1 to 10 or
Yep.
1 to 5. And we'll have to fix the survey so that they can do that easily. Right now, how would you?
Well, because I was looking at this like, oh, I have to circle one of these. Oh, wait,
Yeah,
that
no,
can't
no,
be
no.
right.
We need to revise this so that.
No. This is why Jenny is saying this isn't done. She
Right.
knows she has
Right.
to format it in a way that every question will be
Right.
either you strongly agree, somewhat
Yes.
agree, neutral, somewhat disagree, strongly disagree, not applicable.
Right.
Okay.
You just can't do it on two paper.
In the survey program,
Yes.
you're able to do that.
Right.
So like if I'm reading this, I'm not sure what the difference between teachers recognize academic needs of students and provide supports as needed versus teachers recognize needs of my child and provide additional help as needed. Are those different? Is it like my kid versus all kids? Is that what we're asking there?
You might actually want to ask both questions. You know, it might be two different questions. Teachers recognize the need is one question, and another question is the need is being met.
Well, I mean, they both say that. Recognize needs and provide supports, or recognize needs and provide additional help. So I'm not quite sure what the difference between those two questions is. The real difference to me is students versus my child.
Yes.
Jen.
And maybe we don't need both.
I was just going to say that I think that recognizing the academic needs doesn't necessarily mean that your kids' needs are getting met. Recognizing the needs doesn't mean that their needs are getting. You're saying that the teacher recognizes these needs, but it's not really asking you if their needs are met. It's saying, provide support. It's not asking, like, flat out, is this working for your kid?
Like 1, 2, and 3 seem like the same question to me. So, but maybe we want to say teachers are recognizing the academic needs. Yes, no, whatever. Right. And then are meeting those needs is a separate question. And I don't know, we just get rid of the third one.
Plus, it's called student support. It's under
section
student support.
Well, I think number 3 is. Sorry, number 3 is trying to show that are they providing like additional challenges if they're meeting these, what they're going for.
Kind of
Just,
three levels.
Yes.
Recognition, support, providing challenges.
So provide supports, provides additional help, provides additional challenges.
Right.
I think right now, in the way that it's worded, the differences are a little bit too nuanced for regular people to really understand it. So they definitely need to be reformatted in order to. I was going to say parents, but you get what I'm saying. Definitely needs to be reformatted so the emphasis is put on supporting supports as needed, additional help as needed, and additional challenges as needed. So
And even then, I think it might be too
yeah, it might be a
nuanced
little
for,
bit
like-
too much. I mean, we're just trying to gauge support being met for our child. So. Not mine, probably.
Right. Are they recognizing the needs? Yes or no? Are they meeting the needs? Yes or no?
Yeah, but there's a difference between providing enough support and providing enough challenges. So we do want to separate those two.
But the challenges might be a separate thing. Like, do you see, that they're differentiating, right? I mean, that's the word we use, so that's a word they might recognize.
Yeah, but what I'm referring to is differentiation will address the supports and the challenges, but sometimes it happens that the teachers do differentiate in one area and not the other. So they may differentiate more for kids who need more challenges and not enough for the kids who don't, or vice versa. So we want to make sure that we hit both ends of the spectrum, whether the differentiation or the additional supports and challenges are happening.
I'm just
for
not
those
sure. Reading
different
this,
groups
you
of
understand that supports is for kids that might not be where you want them to be, and challenges are for kids that
Okay.
you want to keep engaged.
Okay, that's good. The semantics need to change.
So we need to work.
I
on
have
those.
confidence that our committee can
Yes.
handle that.
Okay, next.
No doubt.
Naomi?
So I guess when we talk about how each question has to be answered, it's really long. And if we're asking people to do one per child, then I think that's where parents aren't going to be as so inclined, because it's lengthy once you put all those, areas to check if you're answering each question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot.
And I haven't yet read through this, but I'm sure out of the what looks to be maybe 40 questions, there are potentially many that we could omit to reduce it to maybe like 25 questions, something like that, in a realm of a mom's time frame that they can do. Because I know my mom wouldn't be super happy of doing this one for me.
Your dad would.
Just using
Or
my
all
own
of your
personal
siblings.
experience here. 3 children and yeah.
So I guess I hear that we ought to take a look at it.
Or maybe 2 different
Anything.
surveys. One in the
Oh,
beginning.
no.
Split in half. We love doing surveys, people.
Just tell us what you want us to know. Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a way to maybe cut this down a little, but I do like the variety of things that it covers, right? Like I like the life skills. Do you feel like your kids are learning life skills? That's an important thing that we want our parents to feel like they're getting. Excellent support services. I like that we put guidance, nursing, mentoring, all that kind of stuff, so that they know what we're talking about. Because on the first page we're talking about support stuff, but it's different support stuff. I might, in C, I think 1 might be co-curricular activities, and they'd be put in parentheses, drama, music, and then 2 is sports, right? Because I think they're because we don't call things extracurricular anymore, right? We call them co-curricular. So we should probably keep that consistent, right?
I am new to this.
I'm pretty sure it's called co-curricular, isn't it? Am I making that up?
No,
you're right.
And I guess we should say we already
that's right.
cut a lot out.
I like all the questions. I just think it'll
Right, it might inhibit
response.
people. Yeah.
So yeah, I think definitely we can streamline it a little bit, but I think it's great, and I wouldn't want to worry too much about compliance. I mean, let's get it out there, and we all know that there are parents who will happily sit down and fill this out in great detail with a lot of comments, and we want that. We want that level of engagement. This is a first run. I mean, let's get it simplified. Let's put it out there, and compliance may not be great the first year, but if we do a lot of PR around it, they'll have their opportunity to do it year after year.
Yep.
And just another quick question. Will there be a student version of this survey being sent out at all? Because although, parents' input is great, like student input would also be really important on a lot of these topics.
So currently, we're starting with the parents, but I mean, definitely, one of the things that we would need to discuss is, I'm not sure you could give one survey to all kids.
You don't think second graders would do a good job with this?
Right.
I guess I would refer mainly to the high school and middle school, but yes.
Yep.
I think that's a great idea. We should totally do it.
Could be really interesting to have the kids involved in developing the survey. Have a high school group reword this for the high school students. Maybe they don't need to, but a middle school group reword it for middle school students.
Kate,
We'll sign that to you and Carson.
No.
You can delegate. It's fine. Yeah.
So I think, if I'm remembering the correct survey, that it was this one. We had gotten some feedback from teachers and administrators, and some of these things under the student support may have been recommended by them, because we had at first written things more like in a negative tone.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Oh, I do now when you
So
said
I want to
that.
make sure that when we go back and revisit this, we're not going back
Reverting
to what
to
we
the
had.
Exactly. And we did create, it's interesting to read it now because we created this last year, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, one of the challenges with surveys that I've talked about is, it can be survey fatigue, right, too. But yes, we did. We redid it because of the tone. So we can check previous versions, but I don't think anything that's being suggested tonight is going back to that. I think these are all good things for the committee to consider.
Yep. But I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what the results come out.
Anything else?
Actually, that's a good question. So what are we going to do? Like, what's the compilation of this? Do you open up the survey period for a certain amount of time and then tabulate? Is it online?
It will be.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then at some point, you guys will report out with aggregation. I love those.
Oh, yeah. That
Great.
somebody else does.
Of course.
She'll create them all. All right. So is that good for strategic communications?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Finance Committee. Ms. Brown.
Okay. So the Finance Committee last met on January 10th, and in attendance were me, John, and Michelle Lichtai. Michelle, you were not at this one?
No. Right?
I think you were at this one.
I think I was.
Okay, so you weren't. You were tardy. I think you were. I thought you were because I remember discussing this. Okay, so the discussion of use of undesignated fund balance. She was at this one. Okay, for 2018-2019 was one of the things that we had on the agenda, and we just kind of saw some of this in Dr. Foley's presentation on the budget. But what we're looking at doing is reducing over time the amount of undesignated fund balance that we use to offset taxes in the budget. So last year we used $850,000 plus the $111,000 to nutrition. So that's where Becky came up with the number in her presentation this evening. But what we're going to look at doing over the next few years is bring that closer to $500,000 and then down to $250,000 in the following year. And then the only other item that we covered, which was kind of good news, was the Maine Municipal Bond Bank sent us a letter stating that beginning in 2020, the current debt service held by Maine Municipal Bond Bank will reduce in interest expenses. And I think this was for all non-shared debt?
This is for the Durham
debt. Or just Durham?
I only received for Durham debt.
Okay.
One piece is non-shared and one piece is the part that comes through the
Funded by the state.
Subsidy. Okay, so this would be for the Durham Community School debt that is currently held by Municipal Bond Bank, and that that is debt that is currently paid. A portion of that is paid by Durham because they had upgraded to the roof system, a couple things for the school that they pay. It doesn't go through the funding formula. We don't share that expense. So when that interest expense decreases, Durham will benefit from that directly beginning in 2020. Excuse me. Next meeting is February 14th at the central office.
I was definitely there because this is the one where John got locked outside and went home
Yes.
and had to call us and come back.
Oh, yes.
So, Michelle, a quick question about the bonds. Did you receive a similar type of communication about the Freeport non-shared debt?
only received it for the two Durham pieces.
Do we have the same kind of bond for the non-shared Freeport debt?
We do, but I have a feeling it's dependent on the bond and dependent
Could you go to the mic?
Okay.
Right.
That's right.
That's okay. So I only received 2 letters, and one was for each of those Durham bonds. I haven't received any other letters, and my feeling is that it was either when the bond came out, so they maybe took the year and said we're going to redo these, or it was the type of bond that came out. So I have not received any other letters. If I do, I will absolutely notify all of you of that.
And we didn't get it on the really old bond that Durham has for the roof that's gone.
That's correct. We did
Right, so
not.
maybe it's based on the age of the bond, because both of those are going to be retiring in the next couple of years.
Right.
So it could be that they just didn't mess with those, and it was, the school obviously is the newest of the bond, well, this school is the
This
newest
school
bond,
is the
but
newest bond. And I'm sure they're not redoing that one yet.
that one's pretty new, yeah.
It's too new.
Yeah.
So.
All set, Kate? All right. Policy.
Okay. We met and reviewed some policies. You see, we reviewed 3 there. Professional staff, development opportunities, use of physical restraint, seclusion, procedures on physical restraint and seclusion, and there were no changes on those. We did discuss class size again, policy-wise, and that should be coming to you sometime in the not-too-distant future as we come up with something. And we, what's that? Oh, okay. And then we have 2 policies here that are coming to you today for first read. So we'll turn those over to Cynthia. Oh, yeah.
So I would just like a little more clarity on not too distant future, just because if I remember last year's budget process, a lot of comments, public comments were
About
related to
class
class
size.
size. So it would be great to make sure the public is aware that we're reviewing this and here's our discussions about it. Do we have an idea when we might see that?
I think the process takes what the process, it's a process. We're meeting again on February 2nd.
Second, yes.
And the administrators are going to be attending
yeah.
that policy committee meeting as well. So we have some language that, if you don't mind me giving
No,
an
no,
update.
no.
So we've constructed some language based on some other policies that we've looked at, and we have a good framework, I think, of language. And then we had our first cut around what the grid might look like. So there's lots more discussion to be had about what that might look like, whether we did a ratio at our last meeting. Kate and Candy and Valley were in attendance as well, and of course Naomi and Candy. And so, it's. I think it's just going to take some time. When it's going to be on every agenda until we can bring it to the board. And
Do you think we'll have a first read of it?
I don't think we'd have it before March. That's what I'm anticipating. I mean, we'll be discussing it in February 2nd, and then our next, and we might have a second meeting in February, and then the March meeting. So it wouldn't be before March.
And when is the town, the vote, whatever we call that
May.
meeting? That's in May.
That's
Okay.
the end of May. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
At the very least, we can say to townspeople and whatnot that we're looking at this, we're
Right.
considering it.
And
that
it's on
we're not
every
just leaving
agenda.
it out there anymore. We're working on a policy.
Yep.
Okay. We have a couple of policies to look at.
So we have child fine for first read. I'm going to let Bonnie Violet, who stayed, if you have any questions about the first policy, child fine. The only addition to that child fine policy is what you see in the center that's underlined. The school unit shall provide child fine during the first 30 days of the school year or during the first 30 days of enrollment when a student transfer student. So in addition to other child fine activities provided by the school unit. So that's a required change. That's the only change. But if you have any specific questions of child fine, Bonnie's here to answer those.
So required by state statute?
Yes.
Okay. So it means we can't just not look at it for, well, there's too much going on in September. We'll deal with
Yes.
it okay.
As part of her, I think as part of her audit, Bonnie had asked me, can you put these 2 on the agenda? And so we fast-tracked those 2, and this was one of the changes that came because of it. I think you reported out last time. Yeah. Any questions on that one? Okay. The next one, this one has been weapons, violence, and school safety. We've had this, I think we started it last year, actually, and then we had some discussion. So we had some discussion about certain pieces of that. So you can see the changes. Basically, the first section, prohibited conduct, none of that page changed. Even the boilerplate still, or the sample policy is still the same. We did put the Roman numerals to divide up the sections better. We did add in section 2, use of other weapons and instructional activities and the procedures that would take place for that to happen. One of the questions we had was around archery. We do have archery in the middle school, and that is, the superintendent has to be aware of that, and what are the safety procedures that are used for that. I did add a note in there. You'll see at the end of that first paragraph around firearms that are approved under federal and state law may be approved by the superintendent. So an example of that might be a Civil War piece when Fort Western comes, and so that the superintendent would have to be notified, but it is a weapon, but they wouldn't be firing it off or anything. So. But that's an example of that, and that is in law. It's in law in a strange way, but it's in Maine law and in federal gun control law. This section for disciplinary action, section 3, it was just moving as defined by federal law to be right after the word firearm. It just seemed a better sentence structure. And then we added section 4. That notification team, so that really is around if a juvenile is in trouble with the law outside and they feel that there may be some safety concern in school, that there's a procedure that they follow, and then the superintendent sets up a process for a notification team based on whatever it is that has occurred and who needs to know. So there's a process for that. So that's the changes.
Why was the psychological evaluation section removed?
Yeah, I was talking with Bonnie about that. I said, do you remember if we discussed that last year? She says, no, it wasn't us. Do you remember, Naomi or Candy, why we crossed that out? Because we can still do it. It doesn't change the fact that but I'm not remembering clearly why we had crossed that section out. And maybe that was the discussion, because we can do it. It's not, yeah, it doesn't prohibit us.
You look like you're about to ask a question, so I wasn't. I didn't see anything in here about weapons in cars in the parking lot.
So do you know that's today?
I saw that in the paper today.
I haven't seen the results yet.
Right. Do we have that covered in any of our policies? Do we want to
It's not allowed to.
It's currently, you can't. Currently, law is you can't have it.
Right.
And the bill being introduced is, well, what I'm wondering is
allowing it.
So do we want to potentially proactively
have our own policy? Have
our policies state that it's not allowed, so should any changes in should this bill be adopted, we still,
can we do that
as a district say, but not here?
We'd have to research that.
We can research that.
That's a question
I don't know the answer to that tonight, but it's a great question. Do what?
You failed last year. It's probably
And I have one other. I don't know. It's a thought. In C under section 1, where it has the examples and it says bodily harm, I thought it could be great to add the word emotional harm. Just that violence encompasses more than physical threat, but also emotional distress.
Yeah, because this is
yes, JICK.
See, I'm not
JICK E1, E2, E3, and E4. That's coming for review soon.
Okay.
But it's no, actually it's 2015, so it's pretty current. But we will be reviewing that one. It's coming up, but it is covered under that policy. Yes. It's threat or perceived threat, harmed or perceived harm. That's the language that's used in the JICK.
So, question about the weapons. Under 2, the section that was added.
Yes.
It speaks to the fact that objects that are generally considered weapons can be brought to school. Isn't that too ambiguous? Do we want to say school grounds or school property? Because school could be the building, could be the field, could be the entrance. How do we interpret school?
To school or on school grounds, would you?
I assume we don't want them on any school property. I mean, facilities. Yeah.
Where are you?
Like fourth line down, around there.
But this is saying that nothing in the policy shall prevent them from allowing,
right.
like, you to bring your own bow and arrow to school. But this is allowing it.
Yeah, but
right.
Is there anyone? I mean, I'm not reading the sentence directly. I'm just focusing on: are we going to allow the weapons only in the school? Are we allowing them in the school and school grounds? Where are we allowing them? If they do an archery course outside, what does that mean? Can they bring it to the field?
So
if it says
school, I mean, even we get into this with discipline, with cigarette smoking, we make it, clear to kids when they're on the school bus, they're in school. When they're on a field trip that's supervised by us, they're in school. Yeah.
So saying school is sufficient? Do you want to say school grounds to encompass everything?
I don't see the need because.
Okay.
Kate.
So in that same paragraph, we also say that it can be approved by the board so long as the board has adopted appropriate safeguards to ensure student and staff safety. Is that going to be an additional policy or procedure that how do we
Or is that
adopt
a superintendent
those safeguards
instead of the board?
Or should it not be the board but the superintendent?
Right, because I feel like we've never seen the safeguards for the archery program.
I was wondering that because it was before that they brought the archery in, right?
So,
that was before.
maybe somebody on the board did. John, do you remember?
Okay.
Well, right, and I don't think we want to. So in the plays, they've had props, and I don't, and I've approved that, and I don't think we want to have to put that on the board agenda.
Okay, I'll change it to superintendent.
Okay. Any other questions on this one? Great. Okay. So that's it for first reads, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You need a vote.
I know. I was just making sure there were
Oh,
more.
okay.
Not that confused. Okay. So we need consideration approval for the following policies for the first read: child find and weapons, violence, and school safety. Maddie and Jen, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Were you voting or abstaining, Kate?
I voted.
You did.
I voted in favor.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so second read.
I'm not sure if you need any comment from me. It's pretty straightforward, just to align with the practice and the other policies. It was the BD.
Yep.
And we did this.
Okay. Any questions? Yeah, Valley. Oh, that was your motion. Perfect. Second. Maddie, all those in favor? Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that what it said?
You have been.
Yeah, and that reflects how we have
We do it. We do it as a slate, right? So we say these are these are the committees, and we all vote on all of them. That's what we do in for the standing committees.
Right.
The ones we do every June. Public comment? Anyone? No? Okay. Looking a little sparse out there, guys. Okay, so executive session. So we need a motion for consideration and approval to enter into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 4056D for the discussions related to the educator and support staff negotiations for RSU number 5. Naomi? Kate? All those in favor? None opposed? Thank you. All right, so we'll